Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. I'm Kyler Cheatham. Welcome to the Confluential Live. If you're new here, I'm so excited you're joining us. This is an opportunity for us to kind of talk about real things that we're seeing in the marketplace when it comes to technical strategy or system management from our clients. And this week, we're actually going into a conference that I spoke at, which was the Women in Manufacturing Winter Workforce Conference, which was in Clearwater, Florida. I know, so terrible um, earlier this week. So I'm
It's
joined by,
snowing here right now,
I
by the
know,
way.
right? Which I mean, as I said, it was wasted on me. I'm not much of a beach person. Um, I'm a child of winter, much prefer that. So I'm in my element here in all my cozy winter gear, but I was very happy and the conference was very well done. So just a quick shout out before I introduce Adam and then I'll go into the logistics of our live today. But if you're not a member of the Women in Manufacturing Association, then I definitely recommend it. It was a great conference and it covers all facets of manufacturing, everything from more of the technical piece of business systems, robotics, AI, automation, which is more kind of our wheelhouse, to production management. They had a really cool talk on plant design, which I learned a ton about. So I definitely recommend that you can join. And also, they have childcare at these conferences, which is very cool for women that are moms or parents that are involved in that. So great organization, very grateful. We were a main sponsor alongside other companies like Boeing. So we were really excited to be kind of part of that community. So before I get too excited and forget our live logistics here, I just want to remind everyone that we are live on Instagram, LinkedIn. We'll rebroadcast this on TikTok, YouTube, so we can see all of your comments where you're dropping it from. And I think that the cool thing about these conversations is it's just as much what you say versus what we say, right? So I invite you to kind of join the conversation, put your comments in the chat, and to kind of test that feature today. We'll just ask you to say where you're joining us from. Hopefully, it's not snowing, depending on where you are today. But I've got all of my big workshop questions here on my sticky notes. So we'll go through that a little bit, but want to give Adam just a chance to introduce himself for those of you that don't know him.
Yep. Good morning. My name is Adam. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. My name is Adam Cheatham. I'm the CEO of the Confluential. Um, it's super excited to talk about this week from a perspective of this conference for a number of reasons. The first and foremost reason is because of the role that Kyler plays in our organization, is spearheading a lot of our women in manufacturing, women in technology, materials, because we believe in that. That's important. Have a female's voice in the conversation is something that adds value, and we believe that that perspective is something that is worth digging into, which is why she did such a great job and was able to garner so much attention at the Women in Manufacturing event that she went to this week, because that's pretty cool. On the whole, also very excited to hear a bit more about the conference, as we have two young kids, we have a family life. We are get busy during the week, and especially when we travel, things get kind of lost. So I haven't had a chance to hear a ton about this, and I'm looking forward to hear more about it. So this is just as much for me as it is for you guys. So pretty excited.
Yeah, absolutely. Raining in Philly. Oh man. Sorry to hear that. I sat next to a team from Philly, and we have a variety of different clients in the Philadelphia area, so we know how frozen you are. But it was so funny, like hearing them about like how they were, dealing with all of these different things. And I forget sometimes being from the West, going back to that like no nonsense East Coast attitude, and it was so refreshing. Like the production manager talking about getting these like gyms on Volve, right? Like the people that have been tenured in the organization, to even new policies. Like it doesn't even matter. But she was so no nonsense about it. She's like, you either do this or you don't do it. And I'm like, we need more of this in our lives. So she was awesome. They actually did, that company makes catalytic converters as well. So it was very, very cool. But I have a few key themes that I took away from that that I'm going to kind of talk about today. So I'm going to give you just a sampling of them. As always, this is more about what you want to talk about than what we want to talk about. So tell me kind of if any of these spark any questions for you. So we
Well,
had
I have some questions. I want to know about some things too. I
yeah,
can ask
absolutely.
questions too. I
Yes,
know
you're
the
part of it.
facilitator role belongs to you, but my biggest question is, from your perspective, what was the most valuable session that you went to from a perspective of the topic and the information that you gathered? What did you like the most about it?
Well, I think when it comes to sessions, I did a lot of sessions, so that it's a hard questions for me. But I think the biggest kind of theme I took from that session was AI infrastructure versus AI application. And though I had to struggle through Deloitte's presentation because there was a lot of like mean nothing buzzwords in there. Everyone knows how I feel about Deloitte; it's no secret in the industry. We sit alongside of them as a client advocate a lot in type of projects, but they did give an interesting stat from their overall study. So of the companies that are investing in AI, which is almost all of them, right? They gave their hyperscalers are investing over $600 billion just in 2026 in investments. And most of that investment, when they see where that's actually going, only about 7% is going to actual AI systems, and 93% is going to infrastructure to support AI within the organization. So, how do you ensure that your infrastructure can actually do these things? This was the big theme of this of AI infrastructure versus AI application. And so many people that are still so confused about what they're actually doing with AI and what that means in the organization. To what I said, let's name it something else. Let's name it, I called it like the Spartacus project, or like, name it something in your organization, the Flintstones, right? And then we have Wilma that's over on the predictive side, the machine learning side. We've got Fred, who's on the Gen AI side, who's writing emails, doing sales automations, doing those types of things. And then we've got Bam Bam, who's on the collaborative side, the co-pilots, those different type of tools, because there's still so much confusion over what is AI and what is it actually executable in the organization.
Well, that's interesting. So I'm curious. Then, is that from a 93% to 7%? Is that individual companies, or is that more of like an industry wide? Like the data centers are getting 93% of the investments and those types of things.
I think it's industry wide. And you have to remember, this is coming from Deloitte. So they can be a little fancy when it comes to how they give their data. So we would need a lot more background in that. But I think even if that was remotely close to the case, right? What we're seeing as far as company investment in infrastructure, if they're giving money to their data centers, or to develop data centers from an industry standpoint, even if that was remotely close, it still shows the need for really understanding like what is your infrastructure.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, the amount of processing power that's required for AI is just immense, and where it comes from, where it goes, is another big piece of the conversation. So very, very cool. So AI sounds like it was a big theme there. What other types of conversations
Yeah,
were?
and I almost think it wasn't an excited theme anymore. So it was more of like, yeah, 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 we get it, right? And that's why in my session, we did actual tactics. We made a roadmap for the next 90 days of what you're going to do within your circle of influence to solve real technology problems. These are all the technology problems I had them write down, right? Some of them have to do with AI, but most of them have the same sort of problems that go on. So a lot of what I saw as far as appetite, which I think is really healthy when it comes to AI, is let's stop talking about the human AI synergy. Like we get it, like we got you, right? We heard that all last year. But how are we going to make money off of AI in our organization? And what does that actually mean for us from more prescriptive level? So I think the main theme in my conversation, and I'll read some of these to you, but a big conversation was still around the misalignment of the devil's triangle, which we talk about, and I'll draw it for you here in a second. But the triangle sits with leadership, IT, and ops. And still, this siloed area of IT runs our ERP. We have no idea what's happening. We're supposed to be going through this digital transformation so we can get AI, but we have no idea how to make that be a good fit for our organization without IT telling us what we should essentially be doing. And they still kind of gatekeep a lot of that information. And I just want to shout out to these questions over here because these are really good questions. I will get to those in just a second.
Well, that's interesting, just from a perspective of the alignment, because this things that are so poorly defined kind of create bigger gaps in that. And AI, as you've kind of been poking at, is something that can be so poorly defined.
Yeah. That's why I say rename it, right? Like rename it, whatever your brand is in your organization. And it can be something that has, I think this one kind of sums it up, and I'll read it to you. So I asked them, what do people think of technology in your organization? Not do people like it? Do they not like it? What's your biggest problem?
Right.
I didn't even do that. I said, well, maybe, right? People say, I love technology. It's my favorite thing. It's the best thing that's ever happened to me. I highly doubt it, right? And we got none of those because it's still a huge pain point for the organization. And then we split into tables, to which I named them after NFL teams. Most of them, some of them down south wanted to be SEC teams, which I allowed. But this one's from the Chicago Bears table. So we have a challenging ERP system. We need to implement AI. We get it, but we don't know how. And that's kind of two different pieces to that conversation, of like, how do we continue to fix that infrastructure piece when we have an ERP system that we still aren't quite vibing with, right? We're not able to be like efficient around it. And then we have this directive from the executive team of AI, 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 AI. It's like, what do you want us to do, right? Do you want us to make this system that you spent millions of dollars on work? Or do you want AI?
Yeah.
It's confusing, right? And I don't think the modern executive knows what they mean.
Well, that's an interesting thought process as well, because like AI, if you break it down into things, at least in my perspective, an AI agent is an application.
Mm-hmm.
It certainly does a lot more than the traditional quote application, right? You got your smartphone and all your apps that are on it that do all of these little things. You have this AI agent that does so much more. But what's interesting to me about it is the way that it blends that thought process of human resources with technology in a way that is different than we've seen, right? Your ERP is something that tells you something about your data, what's happening in your business, and it's pretty black and white. This is what's happening. It's the data is the data, right? There's no interpretation behind it. But from an AI agent and agentic AI and generative AI and all that jazz, you're asking for something that provides a different interpretation. And there's an expectation that there's an interpretation in this as well. That's what I think is challenging in figuring that out, because you either see it as there's so many different ways of seeing it as this magic tool that's going to fix everything, right?
Yeah.
That's dangerous, but we'll run with it. Or it's just another software,
Yeah.
or it's going to replace all of my people, and it's just the purposes behind AI are so scattered.
Yeah.
And part of that's because of the different types of AI and what they can do and those types of things. But I'm curious to see where some of that ends up in the industry. So did you find that from a manufacturing perspective, people were more focused on the front end of more advanced AI technology, or were they more focused on technology as it pertains to let's fix what we have because we're already paying for that?
Yeah. I think a little bit of both. Like I think so in my it's important to understand, like in these conversations, we're talking about some of the biggest manufacturers across the globe. GE, Boeing, you know,
Mhm.
Nestle. A lot of these are very, very large manufacturers. So they have like an AI innovation lab that they're able to test these different agents. more of the mid-sized manufacturers, I think, are the ones that are being left behind. So I would say like a billion to 50 billion, like right there where they have the budget, right? They certainly can do
Mhm.
that. They're just kind of like running around like who's in charge. I even asked GE specifically, like they were talking about the challenges of in the devil's triangle, where does AI sit? Because what I did is I took all of these and then put them in where they fit in the devil's triangle because everything fits in there, right? And so what they were saying is that AI and data really they report up through operations. And that's a hard piece to kind of look at from an IT perspective of like what is that relationship between the two and how is that liaison going? We also talked about the importance of the project management discipline in bridging that gap between AI operations and leadership. And I was surprised the amount of people that didn't have an EPMO, a PMO, or an office of project management that really helped them be that connector of all things, especially for those larger companies. So that was a big takeaway from my session of like, let's think about developing something like that that can be that
Yeah.
liaison because AI is going to sit in different areas of the organization. Maybe it's best for you to sit in ops. Maybe it's best for your business to sit in IT, but you have to have that awareness of what are you trying to achieve within this type of thing.
Interesting. One, and as we're thinking about that, I'm curious about this question here about the fundamental gaps preventing companies from realizing value from digital investments. And I'm curious if what your feeling was in that was more oriented towards digital investments, like not getting value out of AI, or did you feel like from a manufacturing perspective, the focus was more on not getting digital value from other technology investments?
From other technology investments, 100%,
Interesting.
right? So I think the ones that are doing AI well, right, which was a handful of ones that could even give like case studies of how they're leveraging AI. And most of them were built around Copilot, to be fair. And I'm like, did Microsoft give you that case study or is that actually your case study?
Or
You
did
know,
I call that?
right. And I mean, so a lot of them have like specialized Copilot to
Mhm.
which like I that's not a bad thing, right? But remember, is that specialized because Microsoft wants to put your big name on a label of people that are using Copilot? Or are is it actually benefiting your organization? Either answer is fine. There's no bad answer to that conversation. It's just an awareness of what you need to know. So I think those foundational gaps are a huge piece in just technical IT maturity. A
Mhm.
big gap too for these larger companies is just the hostage white knuckle that their software has on them, right? And they can't do certain things with SAP. They can't do certain things with
Yeah.
Oracle that they want to be able to do. And that's, as I said, we're not going to change that overnight. Should you pull those contracts? Should you start having somebody look into that for sure? Right. Like, let's read what we actually can and cannot do, not just what, our rep is telling us what we can and cannot do. But when it comes to data blocking for different, add-on applications, that's a real fight that's happening. And the fight, the people that are victims in that fight are the businesses, not the software companies,
Yeah.
right? So
And in that, I like this as a follow up question: were there certain conversations that felt urgent versus aspirational? Right, like how much of this was big companies going to try to sell some big dream versus conversations that were more practical on the we're trying to figure out how to solve a real problem here, not with wishes and rainbows, but with real actions.
and they were very much on that. So I mean, we got a lot of feedback on the first day. Like, we get this, like especially from the Deloitte picture that they painted. That wasn't that. I mean, I'll be totally honest. That didn't go over as well as I think they wanted it to because it was too high level, right? These people are well understand that, right? Like they need to get into that next level of manufacturing. I think an interesting piece of that gap that I just want to address too that I felt like was something I'd never thought about before is they have kind of like these two bookends of the workforce right now, right? They have boomers that don't have any idea what AI is, nor do they want to know what AI is, but they've done the same job for 40 years and they're not interested in changing. And that can be a challenge, right? And then they have the other end of the workforce, which is this Gen Z, which is the only generation that really grew up with AI in education. They also are scared to use AI because they don't want to get in trouble. It's been, ingrained in them that we don't use that in real professional settings, blah, blah, blah. And now that kind of has to be retooled and retaught. So a lot of what the people that we're talking, especially in higher education, the next generation of workforce in manufacturing, have created these manufacturing labs in higher education or at technical schools, right? So that you can go in and learn these types of things that you actually would need to learn on the shop floor, thus bringing up the workforce in domestic American manufacturing or Canadian, North American manufacturing, I should say, right? And so I think that's a huge gap that comes with that application too. What are you doing? How does it affect this team and this role? Right? We're
Mhm.
done talking like AI and we're done with the exploratory budgets too. Like that's not something that's being approved anymore. So we need to prove it, right? So
Yeah, I think that gets down to so many of the nature of manufacturing types of things, right? Where I fine, you use all the buzzwords you want, but when it comes down to it, how am I going to make more stuff?
yeah,
Right?
absolutely. And
How am
I
I going
think
to
that's
increase
why
the
I always like these conferences because it's not like they're like, no, you know,
Yeah,
type of
awesome.
thing. So I would say the other gap that I'd love to hear your guys' feedback on is the misunderstanding between business intelligence and artificial intelligence, right? A lot of people, what they were talking about, it's like, okay, that's business intelligence and not like you're stupid, you need to know the difference between the two, but just in the tools that you buy, right? Like, so
Mhm.
you're looking for something to wrap all of these different systems up and give you kind of a report on what's happening. I almost feel like business intelligence missed its moment, right? Where it kind of had a minute and it's like, oh, AI. And a lot of times, like, we don't actually need AI for this specific, this is automation versus business intelligence. So I thought I would get your definition on the difference.
Well, that's an interesting question, and honestly, I don't know that I have a good answer for it. You know, traditionally, business intelligence is about the window into your organization on the health of the business, right? So I would say that business intelligence leans more towards key performance indicators and metrics in a tool set that provides you those health points, right? The um, they're the dashboard of your organization, right? My fuel gauge is low. Here is my speed, my RPMs, and all of those things. Um, Artificial intelligence is more in my mind, oriented towards taking information and drawing a more specific conclusion on it for you, right? What do these things mean? There's a hint of this in business intelligence being a precursor to it, right? You had to have some sense of data and
Yeah.
some sense of being able to consolidate that data into a series of metrics that becomes your business intelligence side of things. And AI reads that,
Yeah.
is the way I would frame it. Um, at the end of the day, though, what AI does that shortcuts that conversation is it puts business intelligence at your fingertips. Show me all of my top producing widgets
Yeah.
from Q1 of 2025 versus how we're trending towards that in this first quarter of 2026. Right? There's a lot of business intelligence lingo in that, and the AI side of it is the ability to respond to that.
Absolutely. And I think this comment here says it all. Before AI, what about data cleanliness and process discipline? And a lot of times when I go in and speak on technology, it's about 20% of technology, right? It's
Right.
more about the business discipline of how are we going to know what systems we have? And that is a huge challenge. Like, we have obviously a core ERP system sometimes, right? Sometimes we have an MES system.
Mhm.
We talked a lot about ATS systems. A lot of times we have all of these different systems that are moving around in the organization, and we don't know what they are. And that's a big problem, right? So we kind of have to start with the basics. Just like if we were to build a house and we just drove around and tried to find a spot to build a house, right? Is that the best process? No, obviously not. We want to make sure that the land is prepped
Mhm.
for us to lay the foundation. And
Yeah.
that foundation is going to be obviously the data. And I think a lot of data mapping is a challenge because they're moving through these different systems, and it's hard to be able to understand, is that data one single source of truth, or is it from some other spot, and then we all of a sudden have finance versus sales versus production, all reporting different revenues, right? And all in these different numbers that we don't understand. So I think that piece of just business discipline of
Mhm.
the understanding of where your data comes from is definitely something you're going to need to spend at least 6 months really dialed into, because that's how we don't get taken advantage of by vendors that just want to sell us something. They profit, as I always say, on your own confusion, right? If you cannot outsource this business discipline from to someone else. You can certainly bring in outside help that might, be in your industry or
Yeah.
have done this before in some other area, but you got to really understand that in order to build additional. We had, lots of talks on RPA and things like that, sensor technology, predictive maintenance, which is this type of group. But we need a strong foundation to build, that big beautiful house that's going to make sure that all the plumbing works, right? All the back end works that flows through the house.
Yeah. Well, I think that you're also kind of like on the topic of why AI is such a shiny word, right? What are we thinking is AI that's actually always been there,
Yeah, exactly.
is already useful, right? Like there are automated manufacturing floors all over the world. That was before AI existed. So this
Yeah,
thought process that, well, the AI is now going to give us the ability to automate our shop floor and all that jazz, that's just simply wrong. It's always been
yeah.
there to begin with. It's just it didn't call it something fancy, so now it's a buzzword, now it's a trend, and now it's an excuse to try something different. So
Yeah, I mean, there was lots of talk about, like, what about governance? What about quality assurance? How do I know that I'm able to plug these types of things in? They felt like, if they found technology or something like that immediately, that it was kind of kiboshed by their parent company. And I know you've kind of had experience in those types of
Mhm.
organizational structures where you either need a certain type of technology for not only your parent company, but also your customers, right? You need something that matches their compliance regulation, which obviously traceability and things like that are huge
Yeah.
when it comes to this space. So I thought I might ask you to kind of speak on that, of like what happens when are that mid-sized manufacturer that essentially was acquired, or you are servicing a customer base that has certain requirements. How do you ensure that you have the ability to still be innovative, but you got to kind of do it on somebody else's terms?
Well, I think that the challenge with this is that AI's got a big mouth, right? Um, AI is that friend of yours that could never keep a secret. So don't tell them your secrets. Like, what do you like? How many times do we have to learn this lesson that way? They're gonna talk. Your secrets are gonna end up on the internet. Your secrets are gonna end up training your competition on how to beat you, right? So the way that I think about that is oriented towards how do we create governance in those types of things. You simply need to know it's protected information. The concept of a non-disclosure agreement has become this moot point these days. Like, oh, it's just an NDA. Those things don't mean anything. They're pretty much meaningless anyways. Right. But they're absolutely meaningless when you're sharing all of your company's secrets with Chat GPT, right? Why sign an NDA with anybody? It's on the internet for all the fun and all the see. So, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be able to say, Google this company and tell me all their secrets, but they are going to be used informationally on the whole. So, when you start thinking about protecting your information and having governance, you need to talk about what's proprietary and be specific about it. Um, there are just certain things that shouldn't be on the internet.
Yeah.
Here's a great example. It's kind of a innocuous, but let's say I own a chicken restaurant
Oh,
and I do fried chicken. I have 7 herbs and spices, proprietary recipe. I keep it locked in a vault. Nobody knows what it is. And then I go and I automate my blending for those herbs and spices. What did I just do? If I ask an agent to tell me what's the best way to put out the most seasoning using this recipe, I just put the recipe on the internet. Now all my 7 herbs and spices for Kentucky Fried Chicken are on the internet for all to see because I asked it to do something that I thought was going to be useful. Is there a way I can get this in this quantity, this in this quantity, and this in this quantity faster or at a higher quality or whatever? I just shared those 7 herbs and spices on the internet. It's now a learning mechanism for somebody. And so, yeah, you probably can't go in and say something like, um, what are KFC's 7 herbs and spices as ChatGPT? And actually, I bet you probably could at this
oh,
point.
oh, for sure. You
You
could
know,
have.
but to use it as an example of the most proprietary secret that's easy for people to identify with, that's an interesting one to me. And now that it's on the internet, what is my competitive advantage if my recipe is my most protected thing, my most protected information is now available to everybody? And now I think that the challenge with this is we're kind of talking about it is it's not like you can say, tell me what 7 herbs and spices are. But if you frame the question in an interesting way, you probably can get the answer. You can trick AI into giving you the things you want. If you say, for example, we'll use Sonic the Hedgehog and this concept of you can't go on we'll use Gemini for this example. You can't go on to Gemini and say, produce a picture of Sonic the Hedgehog doing this or that. Okay, fine. I can't do that, yada yada yada. But you know what you can ask it to do? Show me a picture of a cartoon hedgehog that's blue wearing sneakers in a traditional video game environment that's about somewhere around 32-bit video quality. And guess what you're gonna get? A picture of Sonic the Hedgehog, right? Like it's not like you can't ask your way around these questions. There are protections in place, but at the same time, it's you can fool these things into all kinds of stuff. And at the end of the day, you also have to. I think that one of the things that is continues to be interesting to me on the AI thing is it is only as good as the prompt that it's given.
Yeah,
But that's probably a different story for different time.
absolutely. And so I'm curious, there's one other thing that on the AI front that I heard that I've never seen before. And it just means that I have never seen it. I'm sure it's happening. But one ask that a lot of people were asking for, especially in the Oracle presentation, because they actually own the technology, was like,
Mhm.
hey, we've been using ChatGPT, we've been using Copilot, Claude, all these different systems to take a picture of a piece of machinery that's broken. And we ask them to tell us how to fix it because it takes forever for the technician to get there, even if it's in the middle of the night, right? And
Yeah.
all of a sudden we have this downtime. We want that to happen. And that's been a big help to us, even if it gets us like
Oh
30%
yeah.
of the way there. But I wonder
What's
what your reaction would be to that as someone who's, walks the shop floor and all that different thing.
Well, it's the instructional version. It's the Word document based version of YouTube, right? How many of us go on YouTube? Well, by whatever is broken, how do I fix it? And you end up with a whole ton of videos, right? Your Gladiator. Why is it going through all these electrical problems? Oh, who would have thought? There's another battery hidden underneath the main battery, right? We figured that out using YouTube. Um, ChatGPT and all of these other tools are additional ways of saying, I have a piece of equipment that is misbehaving. Help me understand why. And even in setting up our network, I used it for that, and it troubleshoots quite well.
Mhm.
Tell me what it's doing and tell me what these things are. Even to the point where, I mean, I'm not entirely sure what types of information I was actually reading, but it was basically saying I set up our modem with our access point, and I had like this dead spot I could not figure out in our house. And it basically said, pull up the app, open up this section of the app for your access point, and tell me what it's doing here, 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 and here. And I answered all those questions, and it basically said, here's how you solve that. Change this setting to this, change this to that, and this to this. And it worked. Started working again. So it can be this interactive step-by-step conversation. And where I'm going with this is when we have something that's broken and offline in the middle of the night, you can ask these tools this question. And if you get even better at it, you might, if you have like a CMMS system that's compatible with this and agents that feed into it, you can say, pull asset number 1, 2, 3, 4. It's behaving this way. Tell me what it is probably broken based on this schematic and these metrics, and what it is I need to do to start troubleshooting that. And that's a fantastic use case, and it enables the user to go and do that. Now, let's be fair and honest too, though. There's a bit of this that you can cause your own damage, right?
Yeah, that's
Um,
where I'm kind of going with it. Like, what
you know,
do we need to localize it? I think is the biggest thing that, and like, so one, security, right?
mhm,
Two, like, what if you break the machine? Because you I don't know, maybe it's just like my risk analysis head that goes to the worst case scenario, but like,
yeah,
that's cool, but don't do that.
right. Well, I think that to a certain extent, there has to be some level of trust and authority in this, right? It's not the production scheduler who's out there turning wrenches. It's an engineer, yeah. So, like from that perspective, it's not me on anybody's shop floor opening up panels and rewiring anything. It's one of their electrical engineers, right? So a lot of those organizations have teams that have skill sets for that, of course. But at the end of the day, you still have to be in a position where you ask and then validate what you're getting, right? Um, you'll get lots of answers from AI. Some of them will be good ones.
Yeah.
Same way you will from anybody else. Some of them will be good ones. So,
I mean, I guess is there an opportunity for you though to like get really good at that? Like if that's a huge pain point I'm hearing, right, from the organization, how do you develop something that maybe that is your agent, right? Of going around taking you've put all of the data in around this machine, you've worked with your partners, I don't know. Seems like an opportunity to kind of build out your own little AI technician.
yeah, and there are lots of ways of doing that. Now, the challenge with it, I think, and in the agents that we built, we're finding is that you had to draw the right line between what one agent can do and what multiple agents are needed for. The you might have just one that's responsible for monitoring the health of one piece of equipment and making recommendations for what's changing based on what's changing, and that might be one agent. You might even break it down to that particular piece of equipment has three different problems that it
Yeah.
tends to surface, and you have three different agents to monitor each of those. You could do that,
Uh-huh.
and then a fourth to pull it all together and say this is doing that, this is doing that, and this is doing that. I am curious if from the conference this week, they talked about the level of detail that goes into what one agent can do versus what many agents are needed for.
I'm trying to find my Oracle map because I threw it away because it was so ridiculous. No offense, Oracle. Well, offense, Oracle. Right. And so I think that that's part of the problem to answer this question. They gave us this big schematic of all of these different agents,
Mhm.
specifically in their HCM system. Right. And that was really the team that was there.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. But it leads to additional confusion on like what an agent is and what an agent does. Right.
Mhm.
And I think that's a huge challenge is now we've gone to the conversation AI agents. What does that actually mean for your organization? And that's where I'm seeing a lot of kind of these new startups run just rampant, like selling these agents to these industry specific people. And then all of the sudden, they have no management nor ownership of that agent. And they gave all of their data away to some stranger out across the street. So I think again, they profit from your confusion, right? So handing someone a map with 17 different agents on it and trying to help them understand like what each agent does isn't really that effective. Mapping your own system and seeing more opportunities for agents, that you have to remember that's part of that business discipline. So
Yeah.
I think I can't find it because I honestly threw it away. But that's what we're kind of seeing right now is this overwhelming like, hey, I'm going to sell you all of these agents, it's going to be like a whole department for you, not realizing that that agent is just an automation, right? It's a network of agents that make
Right.
different decisions, and take measurements in order to support a certain area of your business.
Well, yeah, and I remember you sharing that with me, and what stood out to me the most is it's task level stuff, right? That every task, every normalized tasks from a human resources and HCM package function is broken out and given its own agent in a way that's interesting to me in that what's the like every single little question that you could get that's a complicated answer from an employee. What is the best benefits package for me based on what this company offers? They have an agent specifically for that.
Mhm.
Just that benefits analysis. You know, um, how do I manage my employees' paid time off, and how do I track that? Who's tracking to be who's overusing or whatever? There's an agent just for that paid time off management for your employees, and these are individual functions of an HCM system that they plugged in agents for. That I think is an interesting tactic in saying, well, it's just another, it's a digital employee. Is the approach that feels more like.
Absolutely. And is it a good employee? Right, right, like that what
Depends
that's
on how you train it.
exactly, right, and that's the piece I think we're missing in that conversation, like, more agents does not mean better technology, right, and a lot of people think that, and that's a dangerous piece of this game. Luckily, when we come to manufacturing people, they are savvy, like, they're well aware of, like, what that
Mhm.
means, but for some companies, right, that come in and sell them this whole agent fleet, is a big concern when it comes to, like, do you actually need an agent for this? Like, let's not just put in an agent to put in an agent, right?
Yeah.
Um, let's find the business problem. I think we've lost sight of that a little bit of like how we critically problem solve just because we want to continue to be competitive in these types of businesses, especially with how difficult it is for manufacturers at
Mhm.
this point, specifically domestically, whether we're talking about tariffs, whether we're talking about the economy, all kinds of different things affect them. And just the core operations of managing a 24/7 manufacturing. Like the amount of just overall operational capacity that you have to have in that, you need to understand that before we put technology on top of it, right? And
Mhm.
that's a big consideration, not to mention this generation of people that are probably your best manufacturers aren't really interested in carrying an iPad around the shop
Yeah.
floor. And so how do you kind of turn that head to make them think that that's valuable?
As we're talking through that, one of the thoughts that I had too is, you know, what you found people were most intrigued by on the technology side of things. And did you talk about any of our agents while you were there? Or?
Yeah, yeah. They actually asked me, I felt bad because during the Oracle presentation, I was in the audience, right? And
Mhm.
they asked a question of like, how are you using AI agents? It was a table conversation. I gave them the example of our catapult, and many of the people at the table were like, that's it. Like that's what we need to be doing. And then the table actually asked me to get up and explain it to Oracle. And I'm like, well, this is awkward. But you know, and what I'm totally joking. We have great relationships with Oracle. I actually really enjoy seeing their team there. I think it just depends on what you're using Oracle for, right? So I do give them a hard time because I want them to do good by our clients, but we're very, you know, good friends in the marketplace as well. So that piece, I was able to say I use like temperature variation because a lot of them get that. That's important in food and beverage. That's important in, you know, heavy industry that we work in metals manufacturing. Everyone
Mhm.
can understand that somebody needs to take the temperature of a certain manufacturing process, and understanding that agent that's able to see those variances and then make the decision if that could be turned down. But the way that we describe it is that is a network of agents, right? It's not just one that's taking all of those different pieces to it. And they actually asked me to explain that. So I probably didn't do a good job as you and the Catapult team, but I did my very best and they were very interested in it. And I think that's the biggest piece for us is explaining that how an agent actually works, because it's still this very ambiguous term that people are like, okay, is that robots bringing me my coffee? Like what is that? What does that mean exactly? And they're so hungry for that, to be able to say, what does it mean? And then what does it mean for me, Oracle? Like, give me an example for me, not for like
Mhm.
other, you know, very high level type of things.
Well, yeah, and, that's pretty fascinating that it came up in that context. So good for you. The catapult's pretty neat. If anybody wants to see it, give us a holler. It's pretty cool.
Well, why don't you explain to our audience here what it is, so I don't have to.
Well, so here's the way I think about manufacturing in general. We'll walk it back the other way. Manufacturing is a bunch of pieces of equipment that are designed to create in a grouping an optimized output. That may not necessarily be the most. It may not necessarily be the fastest. There's a speed and a quality and a quantity piece of this involved in optimization, right? So for me, what we did with the catapult was created an AI agent that could be that was able to run a catapult based on the optimized way of hitting a specific distance, not necessarily the farthest, right? How do I make it shoot the farthest every time? Because there are going to be variables, just like there will be in manufacturing, that are going to cause that distance, that maximum distance, that maximum throughput to be unachievable at times. And if you run it at max capacity for too long, it will actually cause more problems. Max capacity is not optimized in most cases. The same way if you're redlining your car, you know, down the highway, it's not gonna do good things for your engine. So we picked a distance, and then we did some analysis on how the catapult could hit that distance consistently with a variation that's expected from a perspective of statistical variance, right? And then we asked a person to hit that distance and see how long it would take them to narrow in on it. And then we had the agent do it. The agent can run 100 shots within a small variance and learn from zero what is the optimized configuration of the catapult, firing angle, the basket height and all that stuff pretty quickly. And it can hit 100 shots from in less time than a single person can figure out. A person who runs this catapult all the time can figure out what's the optimum way of achieving that distance and how do I make that repeatable. By the time the individual has done it 10 times, the catapult is run at 100, right? And is within a small range of variance, while in that 10th try, you might have it within an acceptable range ish, maybe. You don't know yet. You might be there, but you haven't validated that. So that for me is what the catapult does, and what's interesting about it is its ability to do that quickly. So I'm curious from your perspective for folks who went to that conference in Clearwater, what would you say you hope women got out of that conference at the end of the second day when you all broke and went home?
Well, I would say the opportunity is certainly for women in leadership, specifically like women moving into manufacturing. We still, have only 30% of the manufacturing workforce is actually women. And that is very, very tiny when it comes to leadership positions, goes into kind of the 10% opportunity. So, I mean, we had everything from production managers to plant managers to, engineers, and I think getting involved in having that conversation is something that I hope that they continue to do, right? And when it comes to the technical part, my thesis of my talk actually came from Bluey, which I, gave kind of my experience of being a mom and being in industry and how difficult that can be, but how amazing it can be too, because a lot of times we take these little lessons that we need. And there's a certain Bluey episode which cracked me up, because I said they say run your own race in that Bluey episode, and all of the women in that room, most of them were like, oh yeah, seen it 500 times, seen that episode 500 times. And so the episode, just a quick, understanding of what it is. Bluey's trying to run this race to beat her dad at the race, and she's doing all of these different type of things to try and beat him, right? And it's really about the best training for her and how she's going to be fastest with her body and her, different variances or variables that are going to go on, not what somebody else is doing, right? It's still a race, right, that people want to win. So we're not at all saying don't do anything, but we are saying do it within your own environment, and remember how important owning your own assets are to that point. So I think from my conversation is remembering that running your own race is about your technology. It's not somebody else's, right? It's not, whatever your vendor says you're going to do. Sometimes those things are unavoidable, but the more that you know about how your business systems operate together, and the more that you're aware of that and take ownership of that, the more power you have in those types of conversations. That's what I hope that they took from our talk. I certainly had such a great time. And I hope that our team can, attend their bigger summit in October in Las Vegas. So if you're listening to this, I've already had a lot of people be like, "Are you going to that?" And let's meet up. I'd love to do that. I know a lot of you ask, if we're going to certain conferences and to meet up there. So we're trying to get better at, engaging on that level. But it was such a great community. The last thing I'll say about that is if you are in kind of mid-level manufacturing as a woman, they have a lot of free trainings and certifications. That's probably the number one question I get. What cert should I get? What does that, should I get a PMP? Should I get certified in Signavio for SAP? All of those things are great, right? But taking advantage of these free education opportunities, and you can still list them on your LinkedIn. You can still use them on your resume. They're just a great opportunity to really kind of dive into what does that mean to be a system engineer for, a big manufacturing company? What does it mean to be an HR? What does it, you get to have that community to kind of ask those questions to better see your own roadmap for your career.
Very cool. I think that's a great valuable lesson in kind of just let your company be itself, right?
Exactly.
Because your competition is doing something doesn't mean they're doing it well.
Absolutely not. And it doesn't mean that that's the best road for you, but don't be complacent. Nobody's, championing complacency. Push your boundaries, ask the questions, right? But do it as a healthy devil's triangle, which I found my little drawing here that we can kind of show. It's a very sophisticated diagram. So, just take your screenshot. But we've got, leadership, business, and IT. And this is the triangle that all needs to work together. If one leg is broken, the triangle can no longer stand. And any technology problem, I challenge you to let me know a problem that doesn't fit within this triangle. And it doesn't happen. That's the exercise that we did. So how are you going to go back to your organization today and make sure that you can at least start having those conversations? A lot of times we still are talking about ERP implementations and, IT having control over that. Well, how can you start to ask questions about, I'm excited about this project. How is it going to affect our HR system? Or how are we going to, you'll be able to, you're allowed to set those meetings. You're allowed to ask those questions. And that's how you become irreplaceable from AI, is figuring out how all of these systems move together and having an economic awareness of how they make your company money, right? That's not going to be replaced by any sort of technology. That type of strategic decision making. So that's, my key takeaways. Of course, if you have questions or you want to, dive into anything else, definitely shoot me a DM. I'm always happy to have a conversation. I've got tons of meetings already set up with a variety of different people talking about this. If you're still struggling with your ERP implementation, it's not embarrassing, okay? Like a lot of people are still struggling. Just because you don't have red-eyed robots chasing you or drones all over dropping shit on you on your manufacturing floor doesn't mean that you're not a really, really talented and technically mature organization, or can be, right? So I think you need to just lean into that and start to know we've got to get these core technologies working so that we can build upon them. Definitely shoot us a DM. I always grab Adam on those conversations, bring him in from his industry insights, or some of our, system specialists and things like that. It's starting with that awareness around how you become a more technically mature organization. That starts with asking questions of people that you don't know, right? And that's part of being innovative, is being vulnerable enough to say, I really don't know how to do this and I need some help with that. So that's kind of what I take from this. Any closing thoughts, Adam, before I remind everyone of what's on the docket next week?
No, I just I'm glad you got a chance to go. It sounds like you got quite a lot out of it, and it seems like there's a lot of conversations in that space that are worth keeping track of. So I appreciate you doing that. And
I vote for North Dakota next year. That's more my vibe on the location. I'm sure no one absolutely.
well, you go to North Dakota in February, and I'll go to Clearwater. How's that sound?
One time I had my two anchor clients. One was in Minneapolis and one was in Tampa. And for some reason, I was in Tampa all summer and Minneapolis all winter. I'm like, guys, we need to switch this schedule up because I'm either freezing or sweating, right? So, but it was a great conference. And definitely thank you to the Women in Manufacturing Association that brought us on as sponsors. It's very cool for us, to be involved in those conversations and to be supporting kind of this next generation of workforce and just technical capacity. So we really appreciate that. As we wrap up, I just want to remind everyone that we are live every Friday morning to talk about kind of things that we're experiencing in the marketplace. So I invite you to join us at 10:30 a.m. Eastern time here in the States. We also replay it. You can follow us at The Confluential or at Kyler Cheatham on YouTube and be able to join in that conversation even after the fact. We always have replays. So looking forward to seeing everyone next week, and definitely shoot us a DM if you have any questions. Thanks so much, Adam.